Hey guys, what I have here is the strangest laser aiming module that Steiner has ever produced. I have no idea how this thing came to be or what its purpose is. And some of you smart marks and some of you Tarkov players are probably saying, oh, well that's the dbal-pl. It is a 4-function pistol, light, and aiming laser combination device. But no, it's not. This is a dbal-rl. This is the rifle laser version of the pistol laser. I think Steiner kind of half-assed this thing in an attempt to have something to compete with the Surefire XVL2 IRC, which can be a pistol laser or can be used on a long gun with a remote switch. But Surefire's design works a lot better in that dual role than the dbal-rl. As evidence of this, I present to you all of the knockoffs of the XVL2 IRC that the budget night vision community is currently hot for. Despite not making a lot of sense and not being all that good, the dbal-rl is still in Steiner's catalog, and that's probably because this was actually adopted by a military. Not a big one, but still. Anyway, follow along with me today on my journey to find a use for this really oddball laser module. Let's go for it. Today's video was made possible in part by our channel sponsor, Venture Surplus. If you like to go outside, Venture Surplus has the stuff you need to stay out there, stay comfortable, and stay alive. Venture stocks a wide and ever-changing assortment of U.S. military surplus clothing, outdoor and tactical gear, and MREs. They're also a vendor for North American Rescue, so you can get authentic, life-saving medical supplies. Check out Venture Surplus at the link in the video description, use the code provided to save 10% off your order, and have fun out there. But if you take some pictures for the gram, make sure you don't look like you're having fun. Thank you to Venture for sponsoring this channel. Thank you guys for watching. Let's get back to the show. The dbal-rl and the dbal-pl are the same unit from the buttons forward. The difference is all in the caboose. The PL has a cutout in the back where the trigger guard would sit on a pistol. The RL has an extended rear end with 2 crane-compatible remote switch ports in it. These are 4-function LAMs with lasers and illuminators in both the visible and IR spectrum. All 4 emitters are in a big cluster at the front. The vis laser and IR designator are slaved together, so they are zeroed with one set of teeny tiny little flathead screws. These lasers have a 1913 compatible crossbolt mount, but the crossbolt can be moved between 2 positions to slightly adjust the placement of the laser on the rail. This is a holdover feature that made a lot of sense on the PL, but on an AR handguard it is not really needed. The fire buttons are also a holdover from the PL. They're placed and angled like you would expect on a pistol light. The right side button is reachable by the index finger on your firing hand. The left side button would be pressed by your support hand thumb. On a long gun, these are not good switches, especially considering the RL will probably end up mounted to the top or the side of the gun, not the bottom. Luckily, you can control the RL with a pair of remote switches instead. There are 2 crane switch ports on the back, one for Viz and one for IR. The RL is powered by 2 CR123 batteries under a cool quick-release battery door. Pinch the locking tabs on either side and it pops open. At the bottom of the battery compartment, we find the RL's nerve center, a series of 8 minute dip switches that control how the device works. If you thought the Maul had a lot going on, if you thought the Key 40 tap programming mode was complex, wait till you see this shit. The dbal has 4 power levels for each emitter, which can be adjusted independently of each other, and it has laser only, illuminator only, and dual modes for both IR and Viz. The RL has no mode switch, so the way you control all that stuff is with the position of the dip switches and sequences of button presses. The fire buttons can be single tapped, double tapped, or held down, and you use the switches to control what the buttons do, and the buttons to control the brightness and which lasers are on, and you use the manual as toilet paper because wiping your ass with glossy cardstock is more pleasant than trying to program a dbal-rl. Can you explain this?
No, I couldn't explain it. That's why I'm not in the videos very often. Stop looking at me.
The best part is, according to what I can deduce, there are 3 different versions of the dbal-pl and 2 different versions of the dbal-rl that have slightly different programming options. The original version of the dbal-pl was released in 2014 and was missing a lot of this functionality. You had a fire button for Viz on the right and a fire button for IR on the left. Depending if you tapped once, twice, or held the fire button down, you would get a different mode. This proved unpopular, so in 2017, Steiner released the dbal-rl and a version 2 of the PL. This iteration adds the row of dip switches in the battery compartment, and at some point between 2017 and when the RL was officially discontinued in 2020, I believe the way the switches worked was slightly reworked. The PL version 2 and the RL don't have labeled fire buttons because you are now able to switch which one controls which pair of emitters. Or you could make it so both buttons do the same thing, which makes sense. Why not buy a 4-function device and semi-permanently disable half of it? On my unit, the default configuration has Viz on the right and IR on the left. A single or double tap of the button gives constant on, or you can hold the button down and release for momentary. You can also use the switches to change which emitters are active in each mode. I got my RL used with no documentation, but I found one YouTube video about the RL posted in 2019, and the reviewer helpfully shows the programming section of the manual. Thanks for the video, Ryan. It was extremely helpful for making this video. Nice watch, by the way. Unfortunately, my laser does not work like that. My dbal-rl was built in December of 2018. The 2019 video appears to show a device produced in October of 2017. I found a picture on Sniper's Hide showing a different version of the manual. The way the switches work between the two versions are subtly different, and the manual is written so badly it's not easy to tell exactly what it is. On my unit, you can flip the number 1 switch to disable the single tap mode, thereby giving you true momentary activation if you prefer, but still allowing you to use double tap for constant on. The number 2 switch does nothing on this hardware revision. The number 3 through 6 switches allow you to assign functions to the tap or hold modes. So I can set this up to disable the single press, have laser only with a double press, and both emitters with a button hold. Switches 7 and 8 determine which button activates which mode, and yes, as you can see from this chart, they give 2 different possible outputs for off-off. Either it's IR only, or it's fully off and the laser can no longer be used. This last off plus off equals off line is nonsense. It's not true. You cannot permanently disable this laser. Come on guys, please proofread your documentation. Anyway, the unit in Ryan's video is a bit different. On this one, you can set different outputs for single tap, double tap, and hold, and selectively disable any of them you don't want. This is clearly a more robust programming system than the one I have, despite being on a unit that's about a year older. The manual for the older laser is even written and formatted better, so it seems like Steiner made the dbal-rl a little bit worse at some point during its very brief run. The complexity of the program isn't necessarily a knock against the RL. You don't have to touch those switches at all unless you want to tweak little things about the laser, and then it's set and forget anyway. The complex switchology might, however, be the root cause of one of the dbal-pl and RL's most annoying attributes, which is an extremely long activation delay. I think it's the worst I've ever seen on a laser module. It has to be at least half a second, but feels longer. Half a second is enough time for a competent shooter to crank off 3 or 4 shots. Mostly the RL is just weird. It can be hard to mount in some places because there's this bump right in front of the clamp, so it needs to be at the very end of whatever rail section you're mounting it to. The buttons are very unlikely to be usable if you mount it to a long gun. The mount and the buttons made sense on the PL, but the RL is too long to mount to basically any handgun ever made, so it seems like a kind of half-assed redesign. I wonder if Steiner rushed the RL to market in order to have something to compete with the Surefire XVL2. The dbal-pl was announced in 2014, and Surefire showed off a prototype of the XVL in 2014 and again in 2015. The XVL2 wasn't actually released until 2019, by which time the dbal-rl was already a few years old and already not popular. But Steiner would have known the XVL2 was on the horizon, and that might be why they tried to get out ahead of it. Or maybe both Steiner and Surefire were building something by the request of a government agency. The XVL2 is much better than the dbal-rl, and it can be used on a handgun or a long gun. No need for 2 variants. The XVL2 IRC also has much better switchology and can still accept a tape switch, a weird proprietary one, but still. The XVL2 just uses Surefire's normal pistol-light switchology. The switch is mirrored on both sides of the device. You can push it straight forward for momentary or rock the switch down to latch it into position. This works pretty well if you flip it upside down and put it on a long gun. Larry Vickers used to love doing this with X300s. There is some appeal to the dbal-rl. It's a lot of capability packed into one small device, even if the performance is underwhelming and the ergos are trash. Steiner suggested that the RL was suited for shotguns and short rifles that don't have the room for a full-size LAM and standalone weapon light. The short-range performance of the RL is perfectly adequate for law enforcement subguns and shotguns. I mounted mine to the Ruger LC Charger 5.7, the idea being that instead of having a big laser on top and a weapon light hanging off to the side, we have one device on top that's no wider than the gun itself. Keeping a PDW slim is important if you want to put it in a bag without turning the bag gun-shaped. Also, the gun and the cartridge are mostly for use at close range, so the lack of output isn't a big deal. To make this setup work, I had the RL mounted upside down on the top rail with a mod button light directly behind it plugged into the IR port. And for viz activation, I just use the onboard fire button with my thumb, which was a bit awkward because you have to push sort of up and forward to hit it. If you have enough rail estate, it's better to just use a pair of remote switches like you would for any standard white light and lamb combo. The RL originally included 2 of Steiner's standard tape switches. It doesn't look like Steiner ever offered a dual lead, dual pad remote switch commercially. Unlike some other Steiner units, the RL works perfectly with Unity crane plugs. They're a good tight fit, but they still come out easily, and the RL's Plessy cannot prolapse. What a sentence, sorry guys. The dbal-rl lasted about 3 years on the market before being discontinued, but it still shows up in Steiner's law enforcement page, and they are presumably still making them for Singapore. Singapore's military very recently adopted the Colt IAR to replace their domestically produced Ultimax light machine gun. In the pictures of the IAR that I've seen, they have MRO HDs with Trijicon 3X magnifiers and dbal-rls. What a setup. They also have a special 2-button switch to control both spectra of the device. I don't know if the RL was adopted for anything other than the squad automatic weapon roll, but it almost makes sense. The light machine gunner is already carrying a lot of weight, so instead of weighing his gun down with a weapon light and a bulky laser module, just give him something small and light that technically checks the boxes. Steiner's laser division, or to use its maiden name, Laser Devices Inc., has designed some real oddballs over the years, but most of them at least make sense. The AR-2A, for example, is a goofy single beam laser that clamps onto an AR front sight base. It's weird, but if you want to mount a laser to a bone stock police patrol rifle, that would do the trick. The dbal-rl, though, is just messed up, simultaneously half-assed but way over-designed. If you want a compact all-in-one lamb for a shorty, build, subgun, PDW, whatever, the best option is the Surefire XVL2 IRC. It's very expensive though, so you could get one of the cheap Rovivon GL4 knockoffs, or you could get a Streamlight TLR VIR2. Brassfax and I compared all of these side by side, and they all perform the same. LED-based IR illuminators are decently bright for a civilian legal device, but actual usability at anything other than extremely close range is hampered by the extremely wide spill of the beam. There's not a lot you can do with an unfocused, compact LED emitter. That's Crane's Law, folks. Or Chappelle's Law, if you prefer.
There's no such thing as a free trip to Hawaii.
Alright, that's our show. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, please check out the links in the video description. You can become a member on Subscribestar to get access to early videos and bonus videos, and the Discord, which is an absolute wasteland of sensibility and morality. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'll see you guys next time.